So my talk today is about continuous integration and distribution in the cloud. We're going to be using the Dev Cloud option for our CI. That's the CloudBees Jenkins as a service offering. I'm going to do that most dangerous of all things, which is a live demo involving the internet. So hopefully it will go well. If it doesn't, this will be a much, much shorter talk. So first of all, who am I? My name is Mark Galpin. I am a senior solution engineer at JFrog. As a senior solution engineer, my primary concerns are customers, communities, and partners. That is, of course, to say you all in the audience, at least hopefully. Communities, of course, mean places like this and the Jenkins community. And partners means I get to do cool new things with Artifactory. Most recently, I spent 3 weeks in London working on the Cloud Foundry deployment of Artifactory. If you want to know more about that, feel free to ask at our booth or the Cloud Foundry booth. So a lot of people don't know who JFrog is. So we started out as an Israeli startup. As you can see, we're not quite so small a startup anymore. We now have a US office, which is what I'm part of. And very recently, we opened a French office as well. We're a little bit obsessed with frogs, as you may have noticed if you came by our booth. But more seriously, we are the makers of the Artifactory binary repository and the Bintray distribution as a service platform. So what is this talk about? So hopefully, if you're coming here, you understand the value of CI. And if you don't, hopefully you're going to leave this talk being really excited about what a modern software pipeline can do. And you're going to go back to your boss and you're going to say, this is all the wonderful things that a modern software pipeline can do, and he's going to say, great, go implement it. So how would you go about doing that? Well, yeah. So he's going to say, I just want it to be like the cool guys. And so I'm going to show you how the cool guys do it. And in fact, how JFrog does it. We pretty much consume our own dog food. We aren't actually using Dev Cloud internally, but we are using Jenkins to do our own build process internally. So what are you going to need? Well, you're going to want your software pipeline to be automated. You want releases to be controlled solidly, but fairly easy to execute. You're going to want it enterprise ready. You're going to want to be able to handle open source projects, but also your proprietary projects as you need it. And you're going to want control. You're going to want to know who's seeing what, who's able to do what, all those wonderful things that are so critical in the corporate environment. So what does that actually mean you need in terms of bits and pieces? So first of all, you need some place to store your sources. You need something to build your binaries. You need some place to store your binaries. At that point, if you wanted to, you could be doing like web services and you could just deploy your services out to the cloud. Or you're going to have to distribute your binaries out to your end users. So today I'm actually going to talk about distributing your binaries out to your end users. Deploying binaries to your services has its own wonderful implications, but we're going to talk about the other use case, which is in some ways easier and in some ways harder. So that does sound like a lot of things to maintain. And you probably don't have a lot of time to waste maintaining your infrastructure. Which is why I'm going to argue that you should just do it all in the cloud and use the services out there that are available. You can really do this today. I would say that it's taken a while for us to get there where you can really do CI in the cloud by hosted services only. But I'm going to show you today exactly that, a complete CI end-to-end solution from code commits to distribution entirely in the cloud. And hopefully at this point, you actually want to learn a little bit more. If not, I apologize, but hopefully it'll get better when I get to the demo. So here's the end solution, right? On the one side, I've got code that you're writing, really awesome code that your customers love. And on the other side, we have customers. And your objective is to get from here to here in the cloud. How do we do that? Well, first up is source control. So it is the year 2015. I hope and assume that I do not have to stand up here and explain why a software company needs source control. I do feel very strongly about this, and if you have questions, you feel free to ask me afterwards, but I think we can skip the explication of the needs of source control at this point in time. But where are you going to get your source control? So one obvious option is that since you probably already have source control, you might want to bring or select your own. And as long as it's exposed somehow on the web, even fully authenticated, that is perfectly fine. Or you can just use the built-in source control that Dev Cloud is providing. They provide Git or SVN. Jenkins itself also supports Mercurial, but they don't provide a Mercurial repository at this time that I'm able to see. And the big advantage of this is that it's going to be network close. You know, you don't have to worry about network interfering between Jenkins and your source server. So we think it's a pretty reasonable choice. Next up is the CI server. So I came all across to the Jenkins user conference so that I could talk to you about how to use TFS. No, I'm kidding. We're going to, of course, use Jenkins. And as I said, we're going to use Dev Cloud. And here's some nice advantages of Dev Cloud. First of all, it's in the cloud. No servers to maintain. You know, you have better things to do with your time than worry about whether your server has gotten the latest security patch. It's Jenkins. This is the tool you all know and love. At least hopefully if you're here at the Jenkins user conference, you know and love Jenkins. And one of the great things about Jenkins is that its extensive plugin environment allows great flexibility for nearly any sort of CI task you might want to throw at Dev Cloud. So the next thing I said you needed was someplace to store your binaries, and that is a binary repository. There are some options with Dev Cloud. You can use the built-in repositories that Dev Cloud provides. Those are network close, and of course they don't cost anything beyond you know, what you're already paying basically for the service. They're not really a true binary repository in the sense that they don't have all the features that a full binary repository needs. But honestly, if you know, you're a fairly small company or you're doing a fairly small set of projects, they may be fully sufficient for your needs. Given that I come from JFrog, however, I'm going to suggest that you probably want to use Artifactory. It's a really great binary repository manager, or at least so they tell me. So why use Artifactory Online? We do have a cloud offering that's very complementary to Dev Cloud. So one reason is we're focused on managing your binaries and helping you produce reproducible builds. We provide extensible metadata for your artifacts and advanced searching by that metadata. And again, Artifactory Online is in the cloud. Nothing you have to maintain. You don't have to worry, you know, you start using more disk space and it just magically appears. We have never yet managed to have a customer make us run out of disk space. And the really cool thing about Artifactory Online from the perspective of attendees of this conference is that Jenkins and Artifactory are two great things that are really more awesome together. So we have automatically generated build time metadata, which is going to provide you information about your build, information about your dependencies, information about your licenses, information about your environment variables. And you're still network close. Artifactory Online is hosted in US East 1, and Dev Cloud is hosted in US East 1. And we have a maintain plugin for Artifactory that's available both for Dev at Cloud and for on-prem Jenkins servers. So now you've built your binaries, and you want to distribute them out to the world. Well, we have a really cool offering. It's actually fairly new for commercial use. And that option is Bintray. Raise your hand if you've heard of Bintray before. Ah, well. This is expected. This is one of the joys of why I get to give these things, right? So Bintray is, as I said, distribution as a service. So why should you use Bintray? Well, you could just put your binaries up on your website and let people download them. But really, that's going to cause lots of problems. First of all, if you get super popular, then you're going to have to provide all that bandwidth for people to download them. And it's also going to be slow because your data center is probably not close to where they are. Bintray really allows you to take a different approach. It's in the cloud, it fronts a content delivery network, SoftLayer or Akamai, depending on what tier you choose to go with. It provides advanced searching capabilities. It provides social capabilities for people to review your binaries if you wish to enable them. It provides a very, very extensive REST API, which is very, very powerful. And it's developing all the time. And you know that it works because lots and lots of people use it. Before we made it commercial, we made it available to the open source community for free. And a lot of major open source projects went for it. We have Ruby Gems, the Netflix open source, all of Scala is distributed on Bintray. If you use a Mac like I do, you probably have used Homebrew. All of the Homebrew bottles come out off Bintray. Gradle is distributed on Bintray. Lots and lots of wonderful, cool programs. But distribution as a service is not just for open source anymore. It's also for your commercial environments. And so again, we have the free open source, but we also have professional and enterprise offerings which can do it. And really, the only reason I include this picture is because some awesome guy in web services took that picture of the Starship Enterprise, and who can resist putting that up on the screen? And as of very recently, the plugin for Artifactory also allows you to push straight to Bintray. And so with that, I've done enough talking. You probably want to see something now. But before I get started on the demo, I just want to call out a couple of things for you to watch for. Sorry, my slides are apparently out of order. So first of all, we're going to go from source to distribution with minimal intervention. Secondly, you're going to hopefully agree with me at the end that Jenkins and Artifactory working together is a really powerful combination. And third, all of this is going to be in the cloud. Through the course of the demonstration, I'm going to touch nothing but my web browser. And I hope you like it. So, here goes nothing. So to start this off, I'm logged into Dev at Cloud, and I'm going to go out to my Gradle Demo 1 build. And you can see I've been playing around with it for the last couple days. And for the purposes of this demonstration, I want you to imagine that this is a snapshot build I kicked off right before lunch. And I want you to imagine that during the lunch hour, I spent all of my time testing this snapshot and deciding it was ready to be staged for a release. And I'm going to kick off my release staging build while I talk about what I did to get it ready. So to kick off the release staging build, I'm just going to click on Artifactory Release Staging. It's going to have everything pre-populated for me, the current version, what the next version is, all the things it should do. in my Git repository to commit it. And all I have to do is change my destination repository in Artifactory to staging and provide a comment. Staging live from JUC. And we're going to kick that build off. So while that build is being kicked off, let's go back and first of all look down here at Dev Cloud. You can see that I have a Git repository here, which I created, which provides me, your standard Git controls. If I go back to the build itself and I hit configure, we can see that this is just a standard build. But when I come down here, and I'm set to trigger right now whenever there's a commit to Git, since this is automated continuous integration. And when I come down here, I have the build environment, and because of the Artifactory plugin, I have some choices here about what form of integration I'm doing. I chose to do the Gradle integration because this is a Gradle project that we're using right now. And it was really easy to set up. And I'll show you in a moment how I configured the plugin. I'm kind of rolling you back in time as we went through this. But once I had the plugin configured, I just have this wonderful drop-down list of servers. Right now there's only one, and it's my Artifactory Online that my team inside JFrog owns, called Internal Sandbox. I get a list of repositories I can perform resolution out of. And for those of you familiar with Artifactory, this is going to be a list of your virtual repositories. I get to show what repository I want to publish to. And since this is the main configuration, that's going to be my snapshot repository. And if I had a custom plugin for staging, I could insert that here. In this case, I just took it out of the box. And then down here, I get various checkboxes on saying I'm using the Artifactory Gradle plugin. It's not required. But if you are using it, they can leverage each other. Very important checkbox. I'm going to capture and publish my build information. I want to include my environment variables. I have include and exclude patterns. And I want to I skipped in this build license checking and Black Duck integration, but those are options. But I do want to publish my artifacts to Artifactory with Maven compatible patterns. And I want release management here. And the only real critical thing here is I inserted the property current version from my Gradle properties file. And by inserting it in next integration properties, that's going to auto bump the version every time I stage a release. And then in the build step, I just have to invoke the build with use Gradle wrapper. And the plugin itself was really easy to configure. I just installed it in installed plugins, available straight out of the marketplace. And then in the configuration section, we have the option to provide our Artifactory URL, again, Artifactory Online, and then some credentials for that Artifactory Online instance. And with that, our build should actually be complete now. And so let's go back and take a look at it. So we can see that build number 20, which is the build I just kicked off, was indeed successful. We can go look at its console output. And it says, of course, it was started by me. And then it's going to go and download a whole bunch of Gradle plugins. And then it's going to go out to JCenter, which is the Bintray open source repository for Java objects, to download all of its dependencies much faster than than the alternative sources for your Java dependencies, by the way. And then at the bottom, you're going to see that it's deploying the artifacts out to internal sandbox. And if I want, over here on the left, I have this option called Artifactory Build Info, which takes me straight out to my Artifactory Online instance. And from there, I can go and look at this build and inspect it deeply. See that this was build number 20, built with Jenkins and Gradle. Took 32 seconds. I can look at the published modules, see exactly what binaries I published and what their dependencies were. I can look at the environment variables. I can do license checking if I wish. But what's really, really cool in here is I can diff builds. So I can go back and diff against release build number 10, and it's going to tell me what was different. So in this case, this is not actually going to be super terribly interesting, because mostly for this demo, I've just been spamming this off and on for the last several days. But obviously my deployed artifacts are different. My dependencies are not different. And my environment variables have changed primarily based on the build IDs that I've gone on. And if I move on down a couple of pages, then I'm going to start realizing that other than the build info environment variables, all of my environment variables are the same, which again is, in the case of this particular build, exactly what I would expect. Something cool we do with our own is we actually set an environment variable. As part of our build, we set an environment variable for every major feature so that we can use this capability to see what features went into each build. Something that I'm here with our release engineer, and he showed me that, and it's kind of a cool little feature. And that's Artifactory build info. All of this was provided by a JSON object that Jenkins uploaded via our plugin. So going back to our build in Jenkins, I think we've done enough inspection to decide that it's ready for release. And this is where life gets really fun. So I want to do a release promotion. And really all I have to do at this point is give a comment, releasing at JUC, give a target promotion repository, libs releases, and I hit update. It does a quick dry run, and it promotes it. And then if I go back out to here, I'm going to see over here I've got a release history, and it's going to tell me that it's been released. Or if I go look at the artifacts in the tree browser, we're now going to see them in libs release local. And see that I just released 1.17. So for many of you, this is where it's going to end, because you're building your stuff only for use inside your company. And at this point, you've done enough. But I promised you that we'd go the final step and take you to the level where you take it from a release build out to the public. And so the final step from there is to do a push to Bintray. And you have a built-in file that you can do to fill in all this information automatically, but since I wanted to kind of show you what you need to give it, I'm going to fill it in for you live. So I just get asked a subject. That's actually the Bintray user or organization. That's JFrog demo. The Bintray repository is pro demo. The package name is going to be the same as the build in this case, so Gradle-demo1. And the version is the same as the build version, which is 1.17. If I was open source, I would also have to provide a license and a source repository, because at JFrog we take open source very seriously, and if you're going to call something open source, you're going to have to tell us where the source is. But since this is a commercial repository that I'm pushing to, I do not need to provide that information. Although we do now allow, as of, I think yesterday, in fact, that you can actually include commercial license information here and the specific commercial non-open source license that you're pushing this binary with for your customers or the general public. And then I'm going to hit push to Bintray. And there we go. We get our status code 200, meaning it pushed successfully. And if I go out here to my package, out on Bintray, I logged on to Bintray, and you log on to Bintray, then you get a list of your repositories for that organization. You go out to the package. It's going to say that I have some unpublished artifacts. I hit publish. I go into the demo. I select version 117. And I can look at the files and see that under 117 I have files. And if I want to make one in particular kind of upfront for the user, I can say show and download list. And then when I go back to general information on this package, you're going to have a download link right down here in the lower left. A list of all the versions with a little badge that says this is the latest version. And in fact, I can click on this button and tweet about this awesome release that's now available, in this case, to the public. Although I would have had the choice of leaving this particular binary repository locked if I'd wanted, so that only select people could access it. But in this case, I just want to make it available to the public. And to prove it, I can just hit download. And Max warned me that jars are dangerous. And there it goes. And that pretty much covers end to end. And I think that took us about 15 minutes to do an entire release distributed out to the world. And I was explaining it the entire way. If you had to do it yourself, you could probably do it in 5 or less. So I went through all of that kind of quickly. So I am now going to let you ask any questions.
Is there a mechanism for this tool to show us which API or which version of an API that we would publish through Bintray is being used? How much?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Is there a mechanism for this tool to come and tell us that if I put in like an API or multiple versions of a particular API, because I'm in government, I will not be putting my software out there. So if I do put some APIs out there and multiple versions of a particular API, and I want to see the usage of those APIs, is there a way that this tool will tell me that?
Yeah, sure. So if you've published, if I understand your question, what you're asking is you've published multiple APIs out to Bintray and you want to know what people are, which of these people are using on a regular basis? Right. Yes, absolutely. Bintray provides that option. It's a really great question. Unfortunately, my demo is not broadly downloaded, so this is going to be very, very boring to watch. But let me pick a slightly better option here. Here, let me sign in as somebody else other than the demo user. And I have a somewhat more interesting package to show you than my demo. So if, for example, you wanted to see Artifactory Pro and see how it's evolved over the varying versions and how they've been downloaded, let's go with, so you can see here, that in the last 30 days, originally people were downloading 3.7. with some smatterings of the older versions in there. And then we released 3.8 on May 30th. And people started downloading 3.8. But every once in a while, somebody downloads some 3.7 or some 3.5.3 or other older versions. And you can see the exact details of who downloaded it when. If it's fully private, you also have the option of giving signed URLs to your customers. And in those cases, you can actually request email notification every time the URL is used. So if you want to know exactly how often somebody downloads it on a private repository, you can do that as well. And thank you very much again for attending the talk, and please enjoy the Jenkins User Conference.